I told you guys before I was a little bit of a misdirected youth, particularly in high school. And so when I was in the 11th grade, when I was a junior in high school, I wanted a tattoo badly. Okay, so this is what I want most in the world. And it's okay because my buddy is friends with a tattoo artist. And so I tell the whole school, I'm gonna get a tattoo. Like everybody knows this, JP, the rebel, I was Jonathan then. Jonathan the rebel was going to get a tattoo. And so my buddy and I, we get in the car and we drive over to Victoria, a neighboring city where his tattoo artist friend lives. His name is Homer. Homer does tattoos. His tattoo shop looks a lot like a garage because there was a car parked in it and it had a garage door. It was a garage. And I'm there and what I want is this angel. It's this real elaborate blue angel that I'm with lots of detail I'm going to get, and I'm there and I'm excited and so I show it to him. And I'm like, hey, do you think you could do this? And I see kind of look of hesitation on his face, and he says, I'm out of blue and I don't know if I have enough ink to do that. I'm like, what kind of, and so, hey, do you mind if I could see some of your work? Like, do you have any pictures of things you've done? He's like, no, man, I hadn't really taken any pictures. I've been busy doing tattoos, no pictures. I was like, okay, all right. I'm not even old enough to get a tattoo, okay? And my parents are going to kill me. And I'm thinking, like, how am I gonna hide this for the rest of my life? Like, how am I gonna keep this from them? These are all going through my head. And so I'm like, what color do you have? And I'm thinking about, like, what can I get? Maybe small, try Homer out, and I'm like, I'm gonna go with a spade, right? And so I'm like, what color ink do you have? And he's like, I've got red and I've got black. So, just a few options and a couple options. And so he's like, what color would you like your spade to be? I'm like, well, I'm gonna go red, okay, which makes no sense because spades are black. But, and so like at this moment in my life, I have every reason in the world not to get this tattoo. I don't even want to. I'm real concerned, like Homer's never done a tattoo in his life, right? But the problem is, I've told everybody at the school that I'm getting a tattoo. I'm gonna have to face Joe Villarreal tomorrow and he's gonna be like, let me see the ink, and I've got to show up with something. I've got to deliver, right? And so this is my primary motivation. Candidly, my sole motivation for getting the world's ugliest tattoo in the history of mankind is so that people wouldn't be disappointed in me, right? And so for the rest of my life, I have this to remind me not to be a people pleaser. It's right? No, I'm kidding, it's right here, it's right here. Just kidding. It's right here. I think that so many of us make decisions based on what others are going to think about us. There's a few times I've walked down that hallway and I think about the challenges in this church and I think how desperately we need this message. Now, I understand we need the gospel. I understand we need the scriptures. You're gonna get both of those today. But if you're here and you make decisions based on what other people will think of you, I want you to lean in for the next few minutes. Because there's a sharpening that God does when we read his word and when we teach from his word that goes beyond those things. There's a sanctification, a conforming to the image and the character of Jesus that happens. So lean in because I think the Holy Spirit wants to do a work on this body and he may start with you. He may start with you. We're in this series, Cross-Examined, where we're looking at the characters that surround the crucifixion. And we're asking, what can we learn about God from them and their interactions with God, the God-man, God in the flesh, Jesus Christ. And so today we're going to look at Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was the governor of the Roman province Judea, so an area within Rome that he was in charge of. And what you know about Pontius Pilate, lots of P's, you guys know I like alliterations. Pontius Pilate was a people-pleasing politician. Lots of P's. Pontius Pilate was a people-pleasing politician. You can remember that for the rest of your life. He's the one that condemned Jesus to death. For a long time, critics of Christianity didn't believe that Pontius Pilate was a real character in history because we didn't have a lot of evidence. But in 1961, archaeologists dug up what is now known as the Pilate Stone. It was a stone, an official part of a building with Pontius Pilate's name on it. So we know this guy lived and he did what this historical book tells us he did. This is a real account of a dialogue. And we're going to see how he wavered based on people pleasing. I think so often our primary motivation in life is what others think of us. I'll just talk about me for a minute, just like how this impacts me, right? It impacts who we ask for help. This is just from my week. Well, we can't ask them for help with the kids because if we ask them for help with the kids, they'll think that we travel too much. It impacts how you prepare, how I prepare. Will they think of me? Will they think I'm funny? It causes you to not be yourself. From criticism? Will it be expositional enough, exegetical enough? Will I please people? Will they like the illustrations? Will they like the Bible? Will it be will it match the flavor of teaching that they're accustomed to? It impacts what you wear. Will my shoes be a distraction? It impacts what you say. It impacts the kind of car you drive, the house you live in. Will they think we spent too much money? Will they help others like us more? Will it hinder the gospel in any way? It impacts how you parent. Will they think we're bad parents? Those are mine. What are yours? My biggest concern for us as it relates to this, what I see here is it keeps relationships really shallow. It's a little bit unique. Like I'm the new guy. I'm just making observations. It's almost like we're all in one of those video games like The Sims, and we've kind of created this character, and we're walking around, and we're in common grounds. Hello, brother. How are you today? And then we go over here, and it's like, hey, Mary, how's school? And what's this? And conversations stay about 2 inches deep. Who knows you? Who really knows you? Like who's going in and knows everything about you? Like I've had people tell me weird things since coming here. It's like, hey man, you don't understand, Waco's different. It's like small town mentality. You can't just go sharing your junk. People will talk about it. Who cares? Talk about it. I stand up on this stage. I share my junk with you every week. Right? Who cares? Be free. Be free. Walk in freedom. Be known. By God, you're known. I mean, one day, nothing's gonna be hidden. You don't want people to get to heaven and be surprised. Oh, wow, you were into that. I had no idea. Might as well tell them now. They're gonna know for the rest of the rest. Right? Walk in pride. Somebody tell me, man, you don't understand. Like, if I share my stuff in Life Group, like that'll impact our family's business. What's the other alternative? Like keep it a secret till you die? That is satanic. That is satanic. The enemy would love for you to do that. Listen, supper clubs are a thing here. I never really even heard the term until I moved here. I've got no issue with supper clubs, except for I'm not a part of one, which we should change. But supper clubs, they're great. They sound awesome. If that's not your life group, right? Make sure there's a distinct difference between what happens at a supper club and what happens in your life group. You know what I mean? Galatians 1:10, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to people please or please people? If I were trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. You cannot be a servant of Jesus and live to please people. And so how do you know if you are a people pleaser? If you make decisions based on what others will think of you, you're guilty of people pleasing. Very plain and simple. If you make decisions, that's gonna mess with you. So hold on to that, write that down. Talk about that later in life group. If you make decisions based on what others think of you, you are people pleasers. So we're gonna look at 3 marks of a people pleaser: that they're powerless, that they're easily persuaded, and that they point fingers. Today is Palm Sunday, which means in the liturgical calendar, the tradition is the church would talk about Jesus coming into Jerusalem on this day, beginning Holy Week, riding on a donkey as a humble servant. And the people shout out as they lay palm branches on the ground, Hosha'ana, Hosha'ana, which means please save us, or salvation is here. What's interesting about that is some of these are the very same people 1 week later that are going to shout, crucify him, cancel him, because of the mob mentality that existed in the first century. So as we move through this, Jesus was arrested. He's tried that night in a 24-hour period. How many trials did Jesus go? Here's a trivia question. How many trials did Jesus face? Just curious, who thinks they could answer this with some level of certainty or accuracy? Scott, because he was at sermon run-through. Jesus faced 6 trials that night. Annas, former high priest; Caiaphas, the current high priest. He then went before the Sanhedrin. What's happening in this culture is the Jews would have to partner with the Roman government to crucify somebody. So you have this theocracy, if you will. That is like when you read teacher of the law, think pastor, teacher of the Bible. Attorneys in the Jewish sect, the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, they were teachers of God's law, but that had nothing to do with the government. So if they were going to arrest somebody, then they'd have to partner with the government. And so this would be like if in your life group, somebody breaks the law and you're sitting there, you're talking as a life group, and you're like, hey, what you've done is illegal, and I think you have to face the authorities. And so you bring them to Harris Creek, and the elders meet, and we talk, and we look at this, we're like, yes, you know, this was illegal, and I think God's best is for us to shine a light on this, and then we would take you to, you know, the Woodway Police Department or the Waco Police Department, and maybe in a situation, I'm not saying that's absolutely what happened, but I could see how that could happen. That's what's happening here. Those Annas, Caiaphas, Sanhedrin, those are the Jewish organizations, and now they have to go to the Romans, the government, where they place him before Pilate. Pilate's like, I want nothing to do with this guy. His wife had a dream saying, hey, have nothing to do with him. I'm scared of that guy. Pilate sends him to Herod, which is not a hierarchy thing. Herod is just, they call him King Herod, but it's Herod Antipas. He's not actually a king. He's over the Galilean region where Jesus is from. So Pilate just kind of appeals to another jurisdiction. He says, hey, this guy, you're not even from here. Go see Herod where you're from. Herod sees him. Jesus doesn't talk. Herod's frustrated. Hey, go back to Pilate. Sends him back to Pilate. And that's where we pick up today. And what I'm skipping, there's a lot of dialogue here, but Pilate does not want to arrest this guy. Like, he's like, hey, who are you? What? Yeah, okay, wait. Hey, guys, are y'all serious? This guy? You want me to crucify this guy? Why do they want me to crucify you? And he's just walking around, and you see that he's tormented. He's conflicted. And this is where we pick up John 19, verse 4. Chapter 19, verse 4. New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, 19. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, here is the man. As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, crucify, crucify. But Pilate answered, you take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. The Jewish leaders insisted, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. And he went back inside the palace. Where do you come from? He asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? And Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. It's important. Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. Pilate said, don't you realize I have the power to free you or to crucify you? Is that true? Does Pilate have that power? Rather to crucify him or to free him or crucify him. Is that, he says, don't you understand? I have that power. It's not true because the text clearly told us he wanted to free him. So he can't do whatever he wants because he's a slave to the crowd. He has to please the people. He has no power. That's my first point. A people pleaser is powerless. A people pleaser has no power of their own. They have to go the way of the people. Jesus says you have no power except what God has granted you. And here's what I want you to know, because I think this is a really important idea if you struggle with people pleasing. God is in charge of what others think of you. He's sovereign over the opinions of mankind. The Proverbs tell us that the king's heart are like water courses in his hand. He directs them wherever he pleases. God's in charge of what others think of you. That's Proverbs 21, verse 1. And so everyone here has a chief motivation. And if you have not renewed your mind, if you are not surrendered to the Holy Spirit, or if you are not understanding completely the gospel, then your chief motivation in life is going to be, what do others think of me? What do they think of me? How will it impact me? How will it impact their opinion of me? But if you renewed your mind and your chief motivation is to live out the gospel, then you will, in all situations, ask God, what will honor you? Regardless of what others think. Like, what will honor you? We don't determine obedience by the outcome. Like I may do this, they may cancel me, and you may be glorified. I might say this, and they might crucify me, and you might be glorified in that. This is such a classic example of how freedom leads to slavery. That the most powerful man in the land, in this area, is a puppet to the people. The most powerful man is a puppet. He has no power. He has no freedom. He's a slave to what people will think of him. And so when we buy something to be liked, or dress a certain way to be liked, or live in a particular neighborhood to be liked, or manage information to be liked, or manage perception to be liked, we become a slave. Am I a slave to the approval, or am I a bondservant, a servant to the approval of others? Or am I a servant to Jesus? The text in Galatians 1:10 sets up this binary option. It's A or B. Which one is it? Who do you serve? And I love that we understand that all power is God's. That God is sovereign over this situation, that this is happening according to God's plan, that Pilate is God's puppet. That in Genesis chapter 3, when sin rushes into the world like a tsunami, the proto-evangelion, the first gospel, he says, I will send the one born of a woman. who will crush the head of the serpent. He may bruise his heel, but ultimately he's victorious. And we're watching this prophecy from the 3rd chapter of the 1st book unfold right before our eyes this week. I didn't get a tattoo because I was powerless. I did get a tattoo rather. I didn't want to get a tattoo, but I got it because I was powerless to do what I desire. I was a slave to the people's opinion. Verse 12, from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which is Aramaic for Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. Here's your king, Pilate said to the Jews, but they shouted, take him away, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar, the chief priest answered. Like now, Caesar's their king. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. And you see that this man who doesn't want to do this is easily persuaded. And that's my second point from this text, from this idea. A people pleaser is easily persuaded. A people pleaser is easily persuaded. By who? By kids, by their kids' friends, by their kids' parents, by their kids' parents' friends, by neighborhoods, by social media, by media, by influences. Who are your influences? What do you make a decision based on? What do you make a decision based on? I was discipled by a man before he died. His name is Charles Colson, or Chuck Colson. And he wrote several books. And I think about him often. One of his books is Doing the Right Thing. And he just kind of broke it down in a moral decision, like you just do the right thing. Like those decisions are made for the rest of your life. You just do the right thing, right? If one's right, one's wrong, do the right thing. But his last speech was on the topic of the spiral of silence, right? The spiral of silence. And I think Chuck Colson would be turning in his grave over much of what's happening in our world today, where good people say nothing, they do nothing. It's been well said that the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing, to say nothing. You cannot hold the line. You hold the line, you lose slow, right? At some point you have to march forward. And what I'm not talking about is you just going on social media and ranting on social media and hiding behind a screen. I'm talking about real engagement, having conversations. I'm talking about someone saying to you at a baseball game, gossiping about someone else, and you standing up and saying, hey, you need to talk to them, not about them. Let's go over and talk to them. You say, well, I don't want to be controversial. Friends, don't you understand the gospel's controversial? The one we follow was hung on a tree and bled out on the side of a road. And here's the danger, man. Like, this is what I feel. Like, I just want to be real honest with you. You guys have heard that before. Some of you, like, you know the cues. You're like, oh, this is where he's supposed to say. Don't you understand? The gospel's controversial. Yes. How you doing? How are you doing? Is there controversy in your life around the gospel? How you doing? They killed him, guys. They crucified the one we follow. It wasn't real popular to be like, man, I'm his boy. That's my God. How we doing? You have to know truth and be anchored in truth, because if you're not anchored in truth, you're going to be swept down the river. This is what happened earlier in this dialogue. It's John 18, the chapter before, talking to Pilate, Jesus talking to Pilate. You say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And Pilate says, what is truth? With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. Even Pilate's searching for the truth. You have to be anchored in the truth, ready to march forward in the truth. I see so many young people with strong opinions that are uninformed. Like just going the way of the crowd. As you sit there, do you make decisions based on what other people will think or what will honor God? At every turn for the rest of your life, I can simplify life right now. You just ask this one question: what will honor God? What will honor God? God, what would most honor you? That's what I want to do. Even if it makes no sense, even if it ends up in me being crucified, like whatever happens, what will honor you? And you stand on truth, because here's the reality about truth. Something can be true even if no one knows it. Something can be true even if no one admits it. Something can be true even if no one agrees what it is, and something can be true even if no one follows it. Something can be true even if no one but God grasps it fully. Like you can be building an ark in the middle of a pasture when it's never rained because God said to. And the whole world could be against you. And this is the deal that churches all over this country strike. You show up, you keep the lights on, you pay my salary, and I'm not gonna really call you to anything. I'll entertain you. I'll make you feel like you went and saw a good movie to the best of my ability, and you'll get back in the car and be like, well, that felt good, and then you'll go on about your normal American dream life. And guys, I would rather die than strike that deal with you. I will not strike that deal with you. I'm not up for that deal. I would rather be crucified on the side of 84 than strike that deal with you. We're gonna identify truth and we're gonna follow it. We're gonna do what it says. We're just gonna do what it says. What does it say? We'll just do that. We'll just do what it says. If you follow the crowd, you're going to get lost in it. And you can't desire to be like Jesus and live in fear of being crucified. You can't desire to be like Jesus and live in fear of being crucified. I'm going to jump over to Matthew 27 for some added commentary on this text. Verse 24. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. And the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. And he handed him over to be crucified. What Pilate does is he takes the blame and he places it on the people. And this is what people pleasers will always do. There will always be like, well, hey, it's not me. Not me, it's no, they said, here's my rationalization, here's my justification. A people pleaser will always point fingers. And that's number 3, a people pleaser will point fingers. That is, they will look to blame others, right? You see this in your children. When children want to please their parents, they blame their siblings. He did it, she did it, they did it. No, it wasn't me. And in this narrative, what you see is fear. He ultimately doesn't want to be blamed, so he passes the responsibility onto the people. When you try to make everyone happy, you're going to need someone to blame. That's just the way that it goes. You're going to need someone to point fingers to.
You're going to need to say, hey, it wasn't me. Who can I point to, right? On staff here at Harris Creek, on our staff, we have this value that has served us really well. We call it shine a spotlight. And here it is, in principle, it's just like when anything goes wrong, when anything happens, when things don't get to where they need to be, or communication falls, or something happens, something breaks, we stop everything, we put a giant spotlight on it, and we say, let's learn all that we can. Not because we're trying to shame somebody, but because we believe that Jesus has freed us from shame, and so we can make those mistakes really valuable lessons. And what I'm looking for is someone to raise their hand and say, hey, that was me. That was on me. And that we would always own that, not point like, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I be Jacob? How do I weasel my way out of this? But no, that was on me. I did it. Like you're in 6th grade and you committed a foul in basketball at a private school, and you're just, me, number 12, I did it. And it's not just about taking ownership. Then it becomes, hey, what can we learn from that? Let's make that those valuable moments of education for our staff so that we constantly get better and more effective at our end goal of helping everyone follow Jesus by engaging the lost, equipping the saints, and empowering members for service. And I think that's a great principle to live by, to walk in the light. There's all these scriptures that call us to be children of the light. Over and over and over, we see that in the New Testament. I think that for some of us, we have this high justice mentality. We're so afraid of being blamed for something we didn't do that we've forsaken the fact that at the center of our religion is our God being blamed for everything he didn't do. And we're Christians, Christ followers, little Jesuses, and yet we're like, no, don't you dare. Like we can't even fathom the thought of going to sleep and somebody thinking that we did something that we didn't do. No. Let me clear my name. This is so important. When what you see is Jesus taking all the blame of everyone else on himself and being crushed. And that's central. Like that's not peripheral to our faith. Like that is central to our faith. Like it's right there in the middle. It is paramount in our doctrine. He's being blamed for something he didn't do. And in reality, Jesus is on the cross. And you know who's to blame? Who's at fault for Jesus being on the cross? Who's to blame? That's right, she is. No, you are. You are. You are. I am. I am. Say what she said real loud. Can we just do that on 3? 1, 2, 3. I am. That's right. That's right, God. We did it. We held him there. He died for us. And so in summary, Jesus is all powerful, and he seeks to please his Father alone. Jesus is not easily persuaded. He has tremendous resolve to endure the cross according to the Father's will. And Jesus didn't place blame. He took it all on himself. And I want you to realize something, that like people who don't fully understand who Jesus is are conflicted. You see this all throughout the gospel. When someone's confused by Jesus, they're conflicted. Like, who is he? What are you here for? What are you doing? And you see that. You see that in the crowd, right? Hosanna, God save us, Lord save us. Salvation is here, salvation is here. Look, there he is. Is he the conquering king? And then days later, oh man, what a disappointment. The religious people we follow don't even like him. Crucify him, not our king. Wash our hands of that. You see that in Pilate. Who are you, man? I don't want to kill you. Don't make me kill you. Don't you understand I have power except for I got to please the people? Come on, man. Who are you? You see it in Nicodemus. You see it in Herod. You see it in the Sanhedrin. You see it in the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Everybody's inspecting Jesus. Who is this guy? You even see it in the disciples. Man, I don't understand. Who like does the wind and waves obey? Like, I don't understand. Who are you? Are you David Blaine? Are you like, what is going on with you, Jesus? Everybody's inspecting him, trying to figure out who he is. But when someone knows who he is, everything changes. Have you realized that? Like Peter, we've talked about Peter's hiding in the upper room, afraid to being killed. And all of a sudden, Jesus shows up as, oh, you defeat death? Dude, what am I afraid of then? Let's go. I'm not scared anymore. I mean, 11 guys. 10 of them died martyr's death. One of them died in isolation. I mean, I'm talking clubbed to death, stoned to death, crucified upside down, thrown off the temple, all because of one reason. They wouldn't deny the resurrected Lord. All they had to do to live was to say, oh, no, he's not God. He's just a magician, just a powerful man, a prophet. It's not God. If they would have said that, they would have lived. But these cowards turned courageous. All of a sudden, they no longer feared the people. What happened? What happened? I'm asking, what happened? Like these cowards, these slaves to the opinions of people turned courageous conquerors. What happened? They figured out who Jesus is. They figured out who Jesus is. See, Jesus came today as a humble servant, riding on a donkey into Jerusalem. But he's coming back as a conquering king. We started talking about a tattoo. Let's end by talking about another tattoo. In Revelation 19, verse 11, it says this: I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like a blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh, he has his name written: King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The man who rode on a donkey and the man who's coming back on a stallion never asked one time in the scriptures, what will they think of me? Show me. He said, show me the verse. We don't have a single account saying, what will they think of me? He said, at every turn, what is my Father's will? I'm just gonna do that. He's the one we follow. What is my Father's will? I'm just gonna do that. Let's you and I do that. Father, would you help us do that? Set us free from the satanic stronghold of people pleasing. If there's anything in our life, anywhere in our life, we've given the devil a foothold. If we're playing political games, if we're slaves to bureaucracy, Father, would you set us free? Would you stiffen our spines and help us to march out of this place, to push back darkness, to wage war with evil, to speak the truth, and yes, God, yes, in love, always in love, that everything we do would be done in love. but that we wouldn't hide behind that. Please don't let us hide behind that, God. Saying that we're doing something in love by not doing anything. Father, help us to speak the truth in love. In all situations, to live as followers of Jesus in all situations, not to talk about people, but to talk to people, not to go along with the crowd, but to march against it at times, even when we're all by ourselves. And Lord, I pray that the fact that there's 1,000 of us in this room, on this property, that we would know that we're never gonna be by ourselves, that would strengthen us. Would you help us? Father, thank you for the forgiveness of sins through the death and the resurrection of your Son, Jesus. It's in his name I pray. Amen.